The relationship between Great Britain and the colonies stayed fairly peaceful for over 100 years. But there were other colonies in the New World besides the English colonies. Both France and Spain owned land in America. Great Britain went to war with France to win more land for America. Great Britain won that war and much of the French land in North America. While winning the war was a victory, it put Great Britain into debt. The country needed more money. Great Britain also had much more land to keep control of. The new king decided that it was time to start paying attention to the colonies. The first thing the British government did was to send an army into the colonies to keep control. To make matters worse, the British government made a law that said that colonists had to give soldiers shelter and supplies. The British government also told the colonists that even though Great Britain had won a lot of land in the war, the colonists could not start moving there. And the British government decided that the colonists should help pay for the government. So they began taxing the colonists. A tax is money that people pay to support the government. The first tax in 1764 was on sugar and molasses. A second tax followed the next year. The Stamp Act forced colonists to pay a tax on newspapers, playing cards, and legal papers. The colonists did not think these taxes were fair. They weren't allowed to be part of Great Britain's government. They weren't represented in government decisions, but they had to pay anyway. The colonists began to boycott British goods, meaning they would not buy things from the British. British rulers decided to stop the Stamp Act. But the next year, the British started taxing on other things, like paint, paper, and tea. And because the British knew how unhappy the colonists would be about the taxes, they sent more soldiers to the colonies to enforce the new laws. The colonists did not like more soldiers in their towns. One day in Boston, a group of colonists began to taunt and tease the soldiers. The soldiers ended up shooting some of these colonists, and 5 of them died. This has been called the Boston Massacre. Not long after the Boston Massacre, the British government stopped all of the taxes, except the tax on tea. In 1773, the colonists decided to boycott one of the tea companies that the British favored. Some of the colonists dressed up as Indians and dumped tea from a ship into Boston Harbor. This has become known as the Boston Tea Party. The Boston Tea Party made the British government very angry, so they passed more laws, giving the British more power in the Massachusetts colony. These laws were called the Intolerable Acts. They thought punishing one colony would show the others what would happen if the colonists disobeyed British laws. But instead of stopping the colonies, the Intolerable Acts made colonists angry, and they began to join together against the British government. On September 5, 1774, representatives, called delegates, came to Philadelphia from 12 of the 13 colonies. The delegates met at Carpenter's Hall to talk about how to settle their problems with England. This meeting was called the First Continental Congress. At this meeting, the delegates said the colonies should stop trading with Great Britain until the Intolerable Acts were stopped. The delegates made plans to meet again if the British government did not respond. But before the delegates could meet a second time, fighting between the colonists and Great Britain broke out, and the relationship between the colonies and Great Britain grew even weaker.